Warrabrook, Scott and Rebecca Weavers tied the knot just a few months ago, but the honeymoon is well and truly over. They'll compete in the Foster Ironman this Sunday, with Scott trying to improve on his 14th last year.
Basically, I've had the best preparation I've had. Me and my coach have worked fairly well consistently over the last 6 months, so hopefully I'll have a good one.
Rebecca has a different challenge.
It's the first time I've done the distance, so I just want to finish, basically.
To achieve that, she'll have to swim 3.8 kilometres, ride 180 kilometres and run 42 kilometres. If it does come down to the run on Sunday, watch out for the finish that has become Scott's trademark.
Run's my strongest point. I've always had a good run leg. I've been running more than swimming and cycling. I've been running since I was about 13, and reasonably competitively. So hopefully that's the last leg. So it's usually I'll bring a lot of people back.
Scott should finish in about 9 hours, Rebecca 12. One of the few relationships where running away eventually brings a couple closer together. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Musical fever has hit Taree once again. The Manning Entertainment Centre was last night filled with hopeful singers and nervous mothers as the auditions for Jesus Christ Superstar got underway. Determined to emulate the huge success of last year's production, Les Miserables, the Taree Arts Council chose the popular rock and roll musical to again draw the talent and the crowds.
I'm more nervous than the people in there waiting to audition. I think that because Les Mis was such a success, that we are going to get a lot of people coming back to see the show, and it's really my responsibility to make sure they get a show of the same quality, of the same magnitude, holding the same magic moments that will bring them back to the theatre.
Jesus Christ Superstar chronicles the last 7 days of Jesus' life. While the religious theme is dramatic, Mr. Matz says there will be plenty of lighter moments.
It's serious religiously, but it also has a message broader than that in the struggle of love and power and passion, mixed in with Christianity, so it really is something for everybody.
Jeremy Miller won the lead role as Jesus, Dean Snook will play Judas, and Paul Curran as Pilate. The part of Capheus went to Rod Illich, Paul Eade as Simon Zelotes and Patricia Williams as Mary. The $80,000 production will open on November 8. Simone Cobb, NBN News.
It's shaping up as the battle of the mandates. 2,500 miners giving their union a mandate to fight the coalition government's mandate for industrial reform.
It is a very open attack upon unions, an attempt to destroy collective bargaining and drive everything towards individual contracts.
It's the first of many 24-hour stoppages around the country to protest the government's proposed industrial relations reforms. Unions claim the changes would cut into workers' awards, remove the right for collective bargaining and turn the Industrial Relations Commission into a toothless tiger. The union has sounded an early warning to the federal government: you take on one of us and you take on all of us.
If they are going to focus their attention on us, or indeed the maritime unions, or indeed the public transport union, then they're going to have a fight. Now, we're not asking for that fight, we're just saying that we will react to whatever action they or employers, aggressive employers, take against us.
Mine workers voted unanimously to join the battle. That includes a national day of action, support for a 15% wage rise and a mandate for the union to fight the government and companies. Miners will return to work from midnight. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
control theory and reality therapy. While it may sound complicated, it is in fact based on a very simple premise, not forcing kids to learn.
Everything comes within us. And here I am at Gateshead High School and talking to students, and that's how they're trying to run this school. Not to make students learn, but to present the learning to them in a way that they say, this makes sense to learn.
For 3 years, Gateshead High School, south of Newcastle, has been run along these principles. Today, Dr Glasser caught up with students and teachers to discuss their progress. Each staff member has participated in a 4-day training program. Principal Bruce Gray is convinced that both the students and the teachers are feeling the difference.
The biggest impact that I've noticed is that when I walk around the school, it seems to be a much more friendly and relaxed place. I don't see any staff-student confrontations. What I notice is staff and students working together and learning together, and the teaching that's occurring is proving to be very effective.
He believes the program has been a great success at the school and has the statistics to prove it.
Increase in student attendance, we've got an increase in student achievement, we've got less discipline problems, less suspensions, we've got less staff absenteeism. So all the indicators are pointing in the right direction.
Research conducted by nutritionists and food science specialists has found that people should be consuming more fibre in their diet, an additional 2 to 3 grams per day. While most people are aware that a lot of fibre is a good thing, Professor David Roberts is concerned that people really don't know much about soluble fibre and its benefits.
They know that fibre in the diet is good for things like constipation. What they perhaps aren't so aware of is that this stuff called soluble fibre is actually very good for lowering blood cholesterol and is helpful for diabetics.
Soluble fibre is found in breakfast cereals rich in psyllium. Oats, barley, dried beans, fruits and vegetables are also very good sources. While Australians may understand the concept of dietary fibre, Professor Roberts believes there is confusion over the two types. It seems roughage is not simply roughage.
Soluble fibre actually gets processed in the large gut, and in the process of being processed, those chemicals that come from that are actually beneficial for us.
He'd like to see the federal government incorporate their findings in dietary guidelines, encouraging people to consume more soluble fibre as well as total fibre in the diet. Sarah Griffiths, NBN News.
It was a scene all too familiar for emergency services as they rushed to the Lakes Way intersection on the Pacific Highway just south of Taree at 8:20 this morning. A car driven by a 71-year-old foster woman collided with a southbound vehicle when she attempted to turn right onto the highway.
She's failed to see a vehicle travelling south and she's virtually pulled out right in front of that vehicle.
The woman was trapped for half an hour before the Taree Rescue Squad managed to free her from the wreckage. She was transported to the Manning Base Hospital suffering serious back and leg injuries. The occupants in the white sedan, a husband and wife both aged 30 and their 2 young sons from Howlong near the Victorian border, were treated for minor injuries. Police say the intersection, the scene of a fatal motorbike accident late last year, is confusing for many motorists.
So over the last few months there has been a number of accidents on this intersection here. It is becoming a bit of a black spot.
Simone Cobb, NBN News.
Wait a minute, aren't you coming with me, Higgins?
Oh, I can't walk that far, mate. I'll see you when you get back. All being well.
You will be well looked after.
I can't leave this ward, Gary.
Charlie would go through with it. I always had him down for nervous, verging on...
They'll let me, Gary? Would you, Charlie? Well, of course, but...
Just hold his hand. Gary will find that reassuring. Thank you, Palmer.
Now, don't you worry about a thing, Gary. Palmer will be...
Charlie would go through with it. I always had Palmer down for nervous, verging on the hysterically frightened.
That's because you don't know him. I think he's got a...
Johns' chances of playing for country appeared slim when he was rushed to hospital last Friday week to have his appendix removed. Typical of this durable character, he's overcome that hurdle and will take on West just hours before the country side is announced.
Well, I think he's one of those kids that he just doesn't like missing games anyway, you know, regardless. I don't think it will make much difference. He just wants to get back on the park. And
his inclusion sees Brett Kamali return to reserve grade, the coach complimentary of his role over the last 2 weeks.
I was delighted with how Brett went. Yeah, he proved a big asset to us. And
the side is otherwise unchanged, with Robbie McCormack again coming off the bench with Grief, Peden and Tracy. Jamie Ainscoe is expected to be sidelined for another 2 to 3 weeks. Meantime, Premiership reserve grade coach Peter Sharp will coach the City and State under-17 side. And in the local league, South Newcastle will be without playmaker Darren Ford for several weeks after he broke his jaw in Newcastle's loss to Western Division on Sunday.
This police surveillance video shows what teenagers can be confronted with when they try to go and see a band at a pub or club. But there is little choice for young people who are underage and want to see live music.
There are a lot of young people who will try to get into licensed places to see bands they like, and we hope that we can get places where they can do it legally.
The first step was taken today as part of National Youth Week, with a group of young people trying to drum up support in the Newcastle Mall.
Well, we're actually hoping to get some support from the community to open up a youth centre, and that will support local bands and have just a general hangout for youth.
Teenagers were making a different kind of noise in Tuggerah for the launch of the Mobile Youth Crisis Service. 2 counsellors will help teenagers in the Wyong Shire talk through their problems.
It's young people who will define the crisis, so it may well be depression from a busted relationship, it may be family blow-up, it may be that those things even go on to more serious stuff like suicidal tendencies.
Young people who want to use the service can dial the toll-free number 1800 067 967. Richard O'Leary, NBN News.
Perfect weather ensured an impressive roll-up on the Central Coast, Gosford's Man Street, the cavalcade of honour for local veterans. But there were few at the War Memorial Park service who could match the story of 102-year-old Roy Hankins, who served in the trenches in France in 1917. The people of Singleton also turned out, the march winding its way from John Street around into the town centre. The local community today remembers the sacrifice made by its men and women in days gone by. But the presence of the Infantry Training Centre here at Singleton is a constant reminder that for some, the call to arms is still a very real part of everyday life. For the young men of Long Tan Platoon, Anzac Day became, appropriately enough, their graduation march out, marking the end of 8 months of training. What do you think when you see those guys come through on Anzac Day?
Very proud that they're keeping the tradition going, and yeah, very proud indeed.
At Burdekin Park, Army Camp CEO Colonel Rod Margetts reinforced the Anzac message.
Never forget that the freedom that you enjoy today was bought at the terrible price shown here and on other memorials across the country and across the world.
As solemn a remembrance as ever, Anzac Day proved a day of special pride for Australia's newest diggers.
At around 2 o'clock this morning, this Mitsubishi Lancer was travelling south along Plymouth Drive at Wamberal when the driver lost control coming over a slight rise. The car skidded several metres down the road, slamming into a parked truck before running off the road, eventually coming to rest in the front yard of a house. The passenger side of the car was severely smashed in. A 17-year-old girl sitting in the front seat was trapped for more than an hour. She was eventually released but suffered severe head injuries and died shortly after her arrival at Gosford Hospital. The driver was taken to Gosford Hospital with a fractured skull and some internal injuries. He's in a serious condition. Emma Siossian, NBN News.
The 150-year-old Tomago house, with its ornate interior and grounds, has been the inspiration for dozens of artists preparing for the exhibition. The display of paintings, sculptures, pottery, glass and textile works is being held to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the building's restoration. The estate was home to the Windias, one of the most prominent families in the legal and parliamentary history of New South Wales. Over the years, Tomago House fell into disrepair and was damaged during the Newcastle earthquake. Proceeds from the exhibition will go towards the upkeep of the historic home.
Well, as you can see, we have done a fair amount of restoration over the years, over the last 5 or 6 years, but we are still in need of extra money to keep it going.
For the first time in 5 years, South Melbourne hasn't qualified for the final series, and coach Frank Arrock was sacked 3 weeks ago. Given these circumstances, coupled with the fact that some of the breakers could be playing for their futures, Newcastle could well finish the season on a winning note.
I want to leave that in John Cosmeta's mind very fresh, that yes, they should be a part of the breakers in 96-97.
In the Super League tomorrow, Adamstown is away to Bonnyrigg. In the local competition, Highfields take on Western in the match of the round, while 4 games will be played on Sunday. In Rugby Union, the Wildfires take on West Harbour in Sydney tomorrow, with the lower grades to be bolstered by the inclusion of part of the Fijian contingent. The trio arrived in Sydney this afternoon. Meantime, winger Nathan Croft has been named in the New South Wales under-20s team.
At the university's Aboriginal Liaison Office, Alex Brown and Anita Watts were this afternoon counting down the last few moments till they can officially add Doctor to their titles. Getting comfortable in their academic dress, including the Aboriginal colours, they prepared to put 5 years of hitting the textbooks behind them. They're 2 of 5 Aboriginal students graduating from medicine in Newcastle this year, but they say more doctors are needed.
Aboriginal people need to be represented in all the professions. But I think Aboriginal doctors is particularly important because we've been really underrepresented in the past.
Alex Brown has spent time in remote Australia with the Flying Doctor Service, an experience he says opened his eyes.
It's a very frustrating experience to go out there and see some of the terrible things. I mean, people living in absolute squalor, And you see all these things on TV for, save the UNICEF child and things like that, but we've got absolute despair in our own backyard.
But while solving the big health problems is a challenge ahead of them, just for tonight, it's party time. Laura Saperstein, NBN News.
The new scheme involves a kid-safe place model. Resembling a large dollhouse, the model is designed to capture children's attention and presents 92 preventable accident situations set up both inside and outside the home. The model will be used as an educational tool throughout local schools, encouraging children to think more about home safety.
For the first time, to my knowledge, instead of telling kids about safety features, which means, oh hum, there's another adult talking, the kids have to look at this model and they have to find what's wrong in that house. So they are doing the problem solving, and if you want kids to learn, then let them do the problem solving, because then it carries through and will carry through into real life.
Child psychologist Dr. John Irvine attended today's launch. He says the kid-safe model will make both children and their parents more aware of the household's many hidden dangers.
Well, they show, for instance, the pool gate and mowers near the pool gate and a tree growing up next to the fence, and they show tablets left out in the bathroom, the tablecloth on the table where there's hot things on it, so the kids immediately pull on that, because all little kids want to be big and stand up and then, of course, drag down.
The kid-safe koala, meanwhile, also made an appearance at today's launch, reminding children to buckle up when in the car. Emma Ossian, NBN News. It has long been a problem for supermarkets, trolleys mysteriously disappearing and then reappearing in the strangest of places. While often accepted as commonplace, the problem is proving a major financial burden to supermarket owners, the misuse of shopping trolleys also resulting in some environmental damage. Now, local company Trolley Services Australia has come up with a trolley tracking scheme, calling on the community to report any wayward vehicles.
The whole idea is to involve the community in helping to protect the environment by getting the shopping trolleys off the streets and out of the drains and out of the bushland. We're helping council, we're helping the community, and we're helping the environment as well.
The scheme involves printing the store name and a special trolley return number on each trolley. Leaflets are also being distributed to homes near the shopping centre. Following several trials in Newcastle, the program has been introduced in Woolworths stores across the state, shop owners hoping to save hundreds of thousands of dollars.
There are 3,500 trolleys lost from Woolworths supermarkets in New South Wales each year. That's a cost of around $1 million every year.
The massacre in Port Arthur has sparked an emotional response among many members of the community. Today, one Newcastle toy store owner who doesn't wish to be identified expressed some of his anger and concern in a graphic display, physically destroying all the store's toy weapons. The man says the weapons only encourage violence among children and argues there needs to be tighter gun laws. Newcastle councillor Mary Gaynor today commented on his behalf.
These are toy guns, but the proprietor feels he should encourage parents to say no to guns for their children and the community to say no to real guns for the safety and protection of all.
Considered a fringe player for the country squad, Muir cemented his starting place with a man-of-the-match performance against the Magpies yesterday. Having achieved that with a stress fracture in his foot, nothing was going to stop Muir passing this morning's physical.
You would have been there on one leg, I think, anyway, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I would have been pulling some bloody rabbits out of my hat if I had to.
And it seems the Knights are going to have to dangle a few carrots to keep Muir in Newcastle. His contract, which was signed before the ARL Super League struggle, expires next season. But if it's not upgraded, he says he may be forced to quit the Knights.
It's pretty hard at the moment, so what I'm doing, I'm just talking to a few other clubs at the moment, and then I'll go at the Knights and try and settle my future there.
Meantime, Harrigan and Andrew Johns join Muir in the starting country side, while Matthew Johns is on the bench, as is Jamie Ainscough for City.
Jennifer Mitchell and her husband Joseph had been married 30 years when last July police claim Mr Mitchell tried to kill her in their home at Bob's Farm north of Newcastle. Mrs Mitchell told Newcastle Supreme Court today that her husband had worn a balaclava and gloves when he tried to suffocate her with a pillow in bed. She says he also punched her 6 times in the face when she struggled. Mrs Mitchell broke free and ran to a neighbour's house where police were called. She said, "I was running for my life." When officers inspected the property on Nelson Bay Road, they found furniture piled up in the lounge room and diesel in buckets and poured throughout the house. Mr Mitchell allegedly told his wife and police that robbers who had stolen $40,000 to $50,000 from the house made him do it. The Crown, however, is claiming Joseph Mitchell tried to murder his wife and burn down their home. The insurance on the property and its contents was increased to $500,000 just 6 weeks earlier. Jodie McKay, NBN News.
The Hobson family was fighting their own battle today with trainer Wal Bentley by their side. They were adamant it wasn't the sport that took their son.
I don't want anyone to blame boxing. You know, we're all here for a short time, not a long time. You can't wrap everyone in cotton wool.
Lance Hobson collapsed in a bout at Melbourne's Glasshouse on Monday, the 23-year-old suffering a brain hemorrhage. Rushed to hospital, he died at around 6:30 last night. Lance started boxing at 8 years old, following in the footsteps of his grandfather. The youngster grabbed a bag of state titles. He went on to represent Australia 5 times.
No one trains for the silver. That's always a boxer's aim, to win the gold. And that's what I want to stick around for the Olympics.
Those were the dreams of a 17-year-old. He missed the Olympics and turned pro. Monday's fight was to be a lead-up to a crack at a world title. Today, the Australian Medical Association renewed calls for boxing to be banned.
Basically, what you're trying to do with boxing is reward someone for knocking someone else's brain apart.
But Lance's parents spoke today of a vicious street attack on their son 3 years ago, which may have led to the boxer collapsing in the ring.
Just a gang of kids picked him, and about 10 of them got on him, and he just had to cover up, and I think the injury may have been sustained there.
7 fighters have died in the ring around the world in just over a year. The boxing world has lost another champion.
Loved boxing that much. He just loved it. He lived for it.
Peter Ryan, NBN News.
It may look like a quagmire now, but the developers claim it will soon be transposed into one of the best recreation centres in the state. Its features will be a 50-metre indoor heated pool, along with a hydrotherapy pool and a rapid pool for children.
There'll be a gym, a circuit gym, an aerobics room, and it's going to be a lot of fun for the folk of Wyong Shire, plus our visitors.
Eventually, an auditorium will be built, along with an accommodation centre, with the aim of capitalising on the demand expected in the year 2000.
We hope to have that up by 1998 so as we can tap into the Olympic Games. At the moment we're in the negotiation stage with a couple of companies to come on board with us with the accommodation centre, but we're looking forward to being able to attract people to Wyong Shire that can utilise the facilities of the Olympics.
The recreation centre is only the first stage of the ambitious project, costing more than $30 million. It's being jointly funded by the club and Wyong Council.
The Local Government Act was changed in 1993, and part of that act permitted council to join hands with private enterprise to achieve an objective. We took advantage of that, and I understand we're the first council to attempt to do that.
He's been seen in the company of royalty, with heads of state, business and industry, as well as the prime movers in any one of 100 different local charities and committees. But one of John McNaughton's proudest personal achievements came with the recognition from the University of Newcastle.
Absolutely astounding occasion, and one that really took the wind out of my sails. I didn't expect that.
Many accolades are from the City of Newcastle, but this must be way up there with the best of them.
Certainly is, really is.
Amid the pomp and ceremony of the latest round of graduations, John McNaughton took his place with hundreds of graduands and graduates from the faculties of education and nursing. A surveyor and former Lord Mayor who served through Newcastle's earthquake catastrophe and subsequent rebuilding, John McNaughton became Dr. McNaughton, recognised for his early ties with the university and his work in the city. Flanked by son Chris and daughter Meg, also graduates of the uni, Margaret McNaughton shared one of her husband's greatest moments. In his address to the Assembly, Dr. McNaughton urged other graduates to tackle issues such as Aboriginal reconciliation and unemployment. Andrew Lobb, NBN News.